She meticulously cleaned every corner of the house, as if her very existence there needed to be erased. No one truly noticed her. No one dared to ask. But it was precisely she who returned the voice to a boy the world had already given up on. Because sometimes those who carry too much silence are the ones who best understand what needs to be said, and when that happens, not even the highest wealth in the country can ignore it. Liam finally spoke again, yet the sound came from long before speech. The Caldwell family's home stood high on a gated community, surrounded by fences, cameras, and profound quiet. It was vast, modern, full of glass, and utterly devoid of warmth. There, everything seemed too clean, too controlled, too expensive to be human. Ilara arrived one Monday morning, her ID badge clipped to her chest, and a canvas bag in her hands. She didn't smile, didn't ask questions. She simply moved with precise steps and a gaze that seemed to penetrate walls. She carried herself like someone who had seen more than she ever wanted to remember, and yet she kept going. No one knew her past. They didn't ask either. She was just another employee from the outsourced cleaning company. She was assigned to the upstairs rooms, where the library, silent corridors, and the playroom were located, a colorful yet melancholic space, as if someone had tried to paint joy into a place lacking presence. In that house, everything operated like a corporation: reports, targets, schedules. Edward Caldwell, the father, was known in the market for his cold demeanor. At home, he was the same, the kind of man who paid for everything but attention. And his son was an enigma. Liam, the boy who didn't speak. Since his mother's death 3 years prior, he hadn't uttered a single word. None. And no matter how many doctors, speech therapists, and educators took turns trying to rescue him, nothing seemed to work. Ilara wasn't hired to teach or to care, just to clean. But some things we do, not because we're told, but because we feel. Liam spent his days like a small ghost. He didn't run, didn't shout, didn't ask for anything. He merely moved through the rooms as if he didn't want to disturb even the floorboards. He was 7 years old, but carried the gaze of someone who already understood loss. He lived surrounded by expensive toys, tablets, and books in foreign languages that no one could explain. Russian, Japanese, Arabic, French, things that seemed to have been left there by well-paid specialists, but without soul. The staff respected the boy's silence, as if it were a house rule. "He's just like that," they'd say. "Better not to interfere." Only Ilara seemed unafraid to get close. Not to talk, but to simply be there. She began to notice that he would appear in the places she was cleaning. He'd observe from afar, hidden behind bookshelves or curtains. He didn't say anything, but his eyes spoke volumes, and for some reason she couldn't explain herself. She began to hum softly while sweeping the library floor. Things from her childhood, songs in French, Spanish, things she thought she had forgotten. It was one of those mornings when he stopped near the door and stayed. He didn't run away. He didn't hide. He just stayed. Mrs. Agnes, the housekeeper, quickly noticed. She didn't like it. She thought Ilara should stay in her place, and interacting with the air was not part of her duties. But Ilara didn't touch him, didn't intrude. She simply let the sound exist, and Liam listened as if he was being called back to life. On Friday, Ilara arrived earlier. She had a reason. She wanted to finish the second floor quickly, to have time to organize the toys in the room Liam usually visited. As she folded a blanket over the sofa, she heard a faint sound behind her. She turned slowly and saw the boy standing there holding a red-covered book. It was a children's book, in Italian. He looked at her for a moment and, without warning, murmured, "Luna." The word came out soft, but clear. Ilara froze. She took a deep breath, and as if responding to a secret, she whispered, "Bonjour, Liam." He said nothing more, but he didn't leave. He sat on the rug, slowly turning the pages of the book. At lunchtime, as she ate alone in the staff cafeteria, she heard whispers coming from the pantry. "She's trying to get noticed. A cleaner, now a teacher. Next thing, she'll be sitting at the boss's table." She didn't reply, swallowed hard. She knew what that meant. In that house, hierarchy was silent but brutal. A cleaner who starts to get noticed becomes a problem. Later, when retrieving her supplies from the storage room, she found the bucket knocked over. The cloth she'd left clean was now deliberately soiled. Mrs. Agnes walked past her and pretended not to see, but she saw, and Ilara understood the message. She returned to her work without saying anything, but that night, before leaving, she discreetly left a folded card behind the bookshelf. On it, a handwritten word, cat, in English, French, and Spanish. Maybe no one would notice, but if Liam saw it, she would know. The following Monday, Liam was already waiting for her. He was sitting in the same corner of the library, the word card between his fingers. When she entered, he pointed to the drawing of the cat and said softly, "Chat." Then he looked at her as if asking if he was correct. She simply nodded, and with the lightness of someone who knows there's no rush, she replied, "Gato, cat, très bien." From that day on, it became routine. While Ilara cleaned, she would leave 1 or 2 cards hidden around the rooms. Simple, colorful words in different languages. Liam found them and collected them. It was a silent exchange, without contracts, without witnesses. But the results began to appear. Liam, who had previously avoided any contact, now moved around the house with more confidence. He began to form smiles, to touch books with more familiarity, to murmur words no one had imagined he knew before. That's when Mrs. Agnes entered the library and found the two of them sitting on the floor. Ilara with a duster on her lap, Liam holding a small book in German. She didn't need to shout. She simply said, "You are mixing up your duties." The next day, Ilara was called to the General Services office. She received a formal warning. Avoid getting involved with the residents. Maintain professional boundaries. It is not your role to teach. She listened to everything in silence, signed the paper with the same pen she used to write the cards. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She returned to work as if nothing had happened. But that same day, inside the toy backpack Liam used, there was an envelope with 4 new cards. 1 word in Russian, another in Arabic, 1 in Japanese, and a final one in silence. It was a blank piece of paper, but Liam understood, and he responded with a look Ilara would never forget. "If this infuriates you as much as it infuriated me, if you also believe that some people see what no one else does, then like this video, subscribe to the channel." Because the turning point that follows is not just beautiful, it's necessary. What began with a song became a ritual. Ilara arrived early, leaving the cards hidden in strategic places, among the cushions in the playroom, inside books in the library, behind the paint pots in the art studio. Liam found them all. He kept them like small treasures, and each new word was a bridge. In a few days, he was already speaking short sentences. He mixed languages naturally. One day he would point and say, "tree," the next, "arbra," the third, "arvara." Ilara never forced anything, never called it a lesson. It was just an exchange, without promises, without expectations. In the library, they started using a small whiteboard that had been forgotten in the closet. "Liam drew," she wrote. "He risked letters," she smiled. Sometimes he would fall silent for long minutes, and she wouldn't insist, because she understood. Silence is also a language. No one in the house knew, not even his father. Edward Caldwell was traveling more than ever. He said he was handling big things. But at home, he solved nothing. Ilara, on the other hand, was rebuilding worlds, not just Liam's, but her own too, because with every word he spoke, she remembered who she had been before the pain, before the fall. Ilara Hayes. A linguistics professor for over 2 decades, a reference in childhood language acquisition, speaker, researcher, until she lost her daughter in an accident, and her husband, months later, from grief. Since then, she stopped teaching, stopped talking, until one day she took a bus to another city with a suitcase and a resume she never showed anyone again. She sought work where no one asked the reason for her hidden tears, and she began cleaning houses. But there, on that cold library floor, with Liam speaking words that even specialists couldn't elicit from him. She remembered. She remembered that teaching doesn't need a blackboard or an ID badge, only listening. And Liam, with his shy eyes, was the first student who made her believe that something inside her had not yet died. That Wednesday the weather was overcast. The library was silent, as always. Liam was scribbling in an old notebook, using coloured markers no one remembered buying. Ilara was writing words on a small whiteboard. Apfel, Liam repeated. Apple. Massin. His laugh escaped, light, almost childlike. It was the first time Ilara had seen him truly laugh. And it was at that exact moment that the door opened. Edward Caldwell entered, without warning, without rush, without understanding. He paused at the sight. His son smiling, the cleaner teaching. For a few seconds no one said anything. Time seemed to freeze between the whiteboard, the colourful cards, and the incredulous gaze of a father who didn't know if he was witnessing a miracle or a breach of protocol. "What's going on here?" Edward's voice was firm. It wasn't a shout, but it sounded like an accusation. Ilara slowly stood up. Liam lowered his eyes. She looked her employer in the eye and replied with simplicity, "We are learning. Together. Learning. My son speaks." The silence lingered, until Liam, still sitting, looked at his father. He took a deep breath and said in a soft voice, "Guten Tag, Papa." Edward took a step back, as if the very ground had shifted beneath him. He called me Papa." "He did," Ilara confirmed, without pride, without defiance, only with truth. Edward looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time, and then turned his eyes back to Ilara. Something within him began to crumble then, an internal structure made of absences and excuses, because at that moment it became clear someone had heard the boy before him. The next morning, Ilara was called to the office. Edward Caldwell was different. No suit, no rush, no cell phone in hand. He looked at her like someone who was ready, not to question, but to listen. "You did something no one else could," he said, "but I don't know what that means to you." She took a long time to answer, and when she spoke, it came straight from her heart. "It means it's still worth staying." Edward nodded. He sat down. He was nervous but resolute. "I want you to stay, but not as a cleaner, not anymore. I want you to be my son's tutor, officially." Ilara was silent. She took a deep breath. "I will only accept if I have the freedom to continue being who I am. No uniform, no hiding what I've been through, and with one condition." He waited. She continued. "Liam cannot become a trophy. He needs to grow calmly, in peace, without being treated as a case of overcoming." Edward was silent for a few seconds. Then he replied with a choked voice, "That condition is more than fair." That night, Ilara took off her uniform for the last time. She washed her hands calmly, as she did at the end of every shift. But this time, looking in the mirror, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Herself. And for the first time in years, she knew exactly where she was meant to be. Some voices are not born from speech. They are born from listening. Liam didn't need more stimuli. He needed someone who could see what he couldn't name. And Ilara didn't teach languages. She taught acceptance. She returned presence. She made a home in a place where everyone else just passed through. Sometimes what heals is not medicine, nor a diploma. It's the silence that respects, the gesture that doesn't invade, the listening that doesn't rush. Edward Caldwell learned this late. But he learned that presence cannot be delegated, and that some people, however invisible they may seem, carry an entire world within them. Ilara asked for nothing. She didn't want credit, nor a position. She just wanted to stay there, with the words, with the boy, with the chance to start over. Because some people, even after everything, still believe that love can speak 9 languages and be understood, even in silence. If this story touched you as it touched the hearts of Ilara, Liam and Edward, share it with someone who might also be waiting to be seen in silence. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay with us, listening to stories that remind us what truly matters, to feel before judging.